a declaration of all coastal areas. That is to say, regions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. Well, 6 we may not have because I still have the statement for Cashew Island, and we're still not yet out of the Kanchi Creek and some parts of the Quarantino River with statements intended for returning officer 6. So the night was pretty slothful as far as receipts. Here at Region 4, for example, it was the plan that the process would have commenced on or about 11 p.m. There were some administrative issues, and that was planned that it would have been reconvened at 2 a.m., and I think it did start in that approximation. In other districts, for example, the process started in District 7, even though 7 has a very limited amount or a small amount of stations. We started and concluded in District 10. We started and we concluded this morning in District 6, that is to say the verification process. And in District 3, we started and concluded that process, also in District 2. The process, ladies and gentlemen, be reminded, entails, as I said, the ROs publicly, in the presence of the agents of the respective parties, who I would have asked, or the ROs would have asked to walk along with their own statements, so that a true verification would have been conducted. In some instances, we started, and particularly the counting agents of some parties, were not armed with their own statements from their parties. So we've had some delays, and we will continue today to bring closure to that entire exercise that will allow for a declaration of the results in all of the districts today. As you may be aware, once that declaration is made, it affords parties the opportunities to have an examination of those declarations that will facilitate their need, if be, for recounts to be done. So there is where we are at this point in time. We are at E+1, and I did indicate in my own forecasting that all things being equal, well, it's forecasting, that today would have been the day when all the declarations would have been done at the level of the districts, and that declaration would have necessitated the onward movement towards the processing, if any, of recounts, and therefore allow the CEO to make his declaration in the earliest possible time. We're still moving with zeal and zest to ensure that that is completed. Now that I have received statements from, or statements are in the building for regions 2, 3, or most of 3, about 92% of 3. 4 still have about 400 statements, which includes primarily all of these banks and part of the East Coast corridor. We have received all of 5, including Moroccobai. We have received almost all of 6, barring the Quarantino River. I will be sending the statement that I would have received for Region 6 to 6 for them to complete their verification today. In District 7, I have received 4 Bartica proper, and for the riverine areas surrounding Bartica, those statements, including the 2 statements for that Region 7, will be receiving for Region 10. The other part of Region 7, we have dispatched this morning in helicopter, and we've already had in sub-region 2, an aircraft that would have been moving from community to community to ensure the statements from those communities, they're transported to the office of the returning officer. In 8, we've received all the statements from the Madhya, 111 miles, and its immediate environs last evening, 34 of those. And today, we're in the process, and as I indicated, the inclement weather in it, so that we could have tackled the North Pacaraimers to ensure all the statements from that sub-region is collected. I cannot say with any degree of accuracy the weather situation, but we are hopeful that at the end of the day, that we conclude our receipts of the statements from the North Pacaraimers. In Region 9, where an aircraft was under the command of the returning officer from E-1 on E-Day, and it continues to be there today. Today, we are receiving in Region 9, we have already departed to Guns to ensure the statements from that village is collected. So we're in the move to ensure that the aircraft movement facilitates speed in the delivering of statements of poll. I should say also in District 1, last evening, the verification exercise started in Mabaruma, and the statements for sub-region 1, that is Morocco sub-region, we did not trust the low water in the river, in the Winey. So those statements from the beach and so on, we are utilizing the medium of an aircraft to take those statements to the returning officer's office. And for sub-region 2, well, 3, as far as Division 111111, I cannot recall its name at this time. It's an hour-and-a-half flight from Mabaruma, and that is completed today. So we're in the process of bringing closure to the receipts of all the statements from all across Guyana, particularly in the far-flung areas. Once those statements are received, the ROs will ensure the verification process continues to ensure publicly the results of all of those stations are known to all and sundry. And at its conclusion, those declarations will be made, and no doubt as the aircraft returns to the city, the statements for yours truly will have been delivered. So there is where we are as at 12:30 hours on, or at 12:25 hours on E+1. We're moving, as I said, to ensure that all those administrative processes and the need to have all the agents from the respective parties, all the observers if they're in the districts, and the media involved in those verification and the declaration, the district declarations. At the center, our commissioners are assisting in expediting the process. All the statements intended for me, the commissioners are involved as far as signing off on those statements before it winds its way to the PRO. That is all I have to say for now, Madam Chair, PRO.
Sure. Thank you very much, CEO. I'm seeing the Zima hand in the here. You have a question, Zima?
Mr. Lowenfield, Robbery Prime News. Given all that you've said just now, is today, anytime today, can you give a realistic time frame when we can get the official declaration of the results of elections 2020? And sir, has GECOM had any reports of unauthorized removals of statements of polls from any of the polling stations across the country? I may have a follow-up to that.
Ms. Rugby, as far as the official results by GECOM today, no, that will not be possible. Today, I expect that the declarations of all the ROs within their districts will be done. So my expectation, or the Commission's expectation, is that today on E+1, the returning officers, notwithstanding the geography of their respective districts, will be completing their verifications, as I said, and move to declare their results today. Once those declarations are made in the districts, the law provides for a period until noon of the following day for a period of recounts. Once those recounts are completed, if there are any material errors derived or arrived at from those recounts, the ROs are required by law to ensure the adjustments are made, and a second, as it were, declaration is made to the CEO before he pieces together all the declared results of the ROs from 1 to 10, and I merely do a summation of those results that ends up in what you refer to as the final and the official results of elections 2020. So today's achievement, or today's subset, is relative to my returning officers being able to conclude the verification and move towards an official declaration that is in the public's domain relative to results in those specific districts.
Sir, just a quick follow-up. Even with your explanation, is the Commission working with a time frame after you've done those things to provide the results to the country?
I would say yes. We will endeavor to do.
Do you have a time frame in mind? The country is looking, everybody's waiting. And I must say, in the absence of official declaration of or timely information, a lot of doubts are festered.
We have not received all the results. And so, but we will endeavor to do it as early as possible. That is all I can say at this time. We're still verifying and signing off upstairs.
Your view, no doubt, if I may add to Madam Chair's, is that at a quick meeting this morning, the same view you expressed would have been expressed by Madam Chair to the commissioners, the anxiety out there and the need for us to push towards the earliest possible declaration. On your second question on unauthorized removal, the removal, and that has been a trend in the management of elections ever since the legislation has changed to ensure that statements of poll are placed outside of every polling station at a conspicuous location. That has been the trend, the removal of those statements, and idea is as early as possible. Sometimes the statement is placed outside of the polling station at 21 hours. And by 21:10, it's gone. Oh, sorry, it's removed. That has been a trend. In some communities, there is the culture of guarding the statement for the residents or electors to be publicly reminded in their respective communities what the results are. This is our village. The statement indicates the amount of persons listed to vote, those who would have voted, and the parties who would have garnered X, Y, and Z amounts of votes for that particular station. And while some communities guard those results with keen interest, others do not. And therefore, no doubt the removal of those statements of poll that would be outside of those polling stations.
You said it's been a trend. Have you had reports in this elections of the SOPs being removed? And could GECOM respond to whether or not the men who were arrested last night, this is in relation to reported removals of SOPs in a ward in the city?
In the city? I tell you what, we're aware of the removal of statements because when other residents of particular communities go out there to have a look-see, there is none. And usually electors would call into GECOM to say, well, they have completed the count in my community, and the results, I understand it was there, and it is no longer there, and could we provide a second copy of the statement for particular communities? So that has always been a trend, and yes, it has happened during the conduct of these elections that we're still trying our very best to declare its results in the earliest possible time. As far as arrests, you said in the ward, in the municipality of Georgetown, I have not been apprised of any arrests or the circumstances surrounding that. I'm certain if I inquire of the Deputy Commissioner of Operations as to what may have obtained over the last 24 hours or so, she will be able to inform GECOM. What she did inform about was relative to the lateness of the departure of boxes and statements from particular localities in District 4. That is what you were informed about every step of the way, because we're intimately involved in that process. But the rest, she did not provide that data.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. Yes. All right, so we will move into a quick presentation on the preliminary information that I have. I just want to remind you that even though the CEO has indicated that we have received statements of polls from a number of regions that are now coming in, there is an administrative process in place before it actually gets to this point. So while it might sound as though a lot is coming in at this point, there is still a process for it to go through. So what you're going to see is not a representation of what we have in the building, but those that have been processed up to this point. All right, so I'm going to start you off with the regional elections. And as you notice at the top of the 2,339 polling stations, we're at 139 that has been processed to this point. So I hope that in the next few hours that now the process has somehow been geared up, that we will be able to push a lot more of this through the system and to provide you with the details. The website should be live, and therefore you will be able to see this as soon as we leave. But just to give you a quick go through, you would notice that in Region 1 of the 99 polling stations there, it's just 12 that has been processed. In Region 2, 17 of 135. In Region 3, 11 of the 355. In Region 4, 58 of the 879. There's no information in as yet for District 5. In Region 6, 18 of the 378. In Region 8, 9 of the 55. In Region 9, 11 of 73. And in 10, we just have 3 of the 125. So if you were to look at the numbers that are coming in thus far, you would see for Region 1, as we go across, we have Anog, no votes entered there as yet. The APNU AFC with 893. Change Guyana, we don't have any there. The Federal United Party with 3. The LGP with 13. OVP with none. None coming in so far as it relates to, we're seeing here the People's Progressive Party with 1,345 votes here. I'm not sure why it's not being displayed there. I think there's a highlight there. But as we roll over, it's 1,345. PRP with 2. TCI with 0. TNM with 0. URP 1, which gives a total of 2,257. In District 2, we have Anog with 10, APNU AFC with 1,123, Change Guyana with 24, Federal United with none, LGP with 7, OVP with none, People's Progressive Party with 4,112 votes, PRP with 5, TCI with 4, TNM with none, URP with 13, giving us a total of 5,298. In Region 3, Anog with 7, APNU AFC with 500, Change Guyana with 12, Federal United Party with 0, Liberty and Justice Party with 0, OVP 0, People's Progressive Party Civic 1,539, PRP with 2, TCI 1, TNM 0, and URP 0, which gives us the total of 2,061 votes. we move across to District 4. We see the APNU AFC, ANOG with 89 votes. The APNU AFC with 12,681. We have Change Guyana with 6. In District Federal United Party with 0. We have LGP with 28. OVP with none. People's Progressive Party Civic with 972. PRP with 25. TCI with 40. TNM with 3, and URP with 3, giving us a total of 13,905. We don't have anything in across the board for District 5, so I'm going to take you way down into District 6. ANOG. I'm not sure what is happening. Sorry. You want to check it out here for me? See what might be happening. Yeah. No. Colleagues, my apologies. I'm not sure what might have happened there with that table. So while I wait to have this fixed, I'm going to move you across into the regional so that we might be able to have an idea as to what is happening over there. Can you pull this over for me, please? While we wait to get this fixed, I think there were some other questions on the floor. Can we go to that, and then we'll be able to revert to this? Neil Marks, can I have the microphone, please?
Mr. CEO, can you confirm that the returning officers have to physically come to Georgetown with these statements to deliver them to you?
The ROs are a representative of the RO. Last evening, for example, those that I would have received, it was a representative of the RO. I think today, for the ROs were where they started the verification process, they were taking that by themselves. So the RO can delegate, and they did in some instances of delegating to the clerks the delivery of those statements to me.
Can you pass the microphone?
Thank you very much. Mr. CEO, my name is Andy Johnson. I'm a journalist from Trinidad and Tobago, and I want to crave your indulgence to respond to a development that is alive right now in Trinidad and Tobago, where there is a social media post on the basis of which people are celebrating and sending congratulations. There are numbers that have been published saying that the PPP Civic has won the election. and people are heralding the new president. How do you respond to that to an audience in Trinidad and Tobago?
I think, as you would have heard, I said very clear and very pellucid that we are not yet even at the stage where declarations were made by GECOM or through TROs that the results in the respective districts are whatever they're intended to be. So, not having the declaration by districts, I don't want to presume further. We don't have the declarations, and therefore there is no declaration by the CEO of the results of the elections of 2020. If you ask how can that be possible, and the U.S. media will know that, and those results will not be official, if a media house, for example, would have gone through the process of obtaining results by polling stations and do their collation, they will arrive at an unofficial position of who would have won and who would have lost. But as far as GECOM is concerned, we are not yet at that place at this moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think there's another question.
Mr. CEO, Bob James, Nightly News. Based on your explanation on the process, my thinking is that there are a number of prerequisites that have to be satisfied before GECOM can make an official declaration. Now, with regards to anxiety and expectations, is there any possibility that an executive decision can come from GECOM until, even if those prerequisites are not satisfied?
I think GECOM as the body responsible for the conduct, or the autonomous body responsible for the conduct of elections in Guyana. This body is guided by laws, as you rightly said, and these laws prescribe all the, what you call prerequisites, all the processes relative to the conduct of the poll, the conduct of officers at the close of poll, the conduct for the count, the conduct after the count, the conduct after declaration. It even speaks to a timing for the declaration. Section 99 of our Representation of the People Act speaks to as soon as practicable and not later than 15 days after the elections. The Commission shall declare those results. So every subset of what we do, whether it's in our preparatory arrangements, on the conduct, that is to say the day of the poll, and even on the day of the poll, what actions are to be taken by officers in the utilizing of the poll book, for example. The law speaks to that. So as far as an executive decision, if it's going to be within the framework of the law, there's no difficulty there, because the executive of the commission, as I mentioned earlier, met as early as this morning for a quick deliberation relative to speeding up the process. So I think any decision to be made relative to elections, all elections, the Commission shall decide within the framework of the law what it can do, how we can fast track, how we could minimize the anxiety. And I think you would have recognized that in the Commission's view to minimize the anxiety it has afforded, and this is not within the law, that you declare publicly, make the public in each district totally aware as to what is. There was a time there was no declaration at the place of poll that afforded electors to become aware of what obtains, as I said earlier, in their own communities. We have moved that to the district. We're all in District 1 and District 5 and wherever will know publicly, because the declaration, a public exercise, informs the electors of the particular districts. So we have moved within the framework of the law, well, you say executive in an executive way, to ensure there is minimization of the anxiety that you reference. Outside of that minimization, I'm sure the Commission will continue to work within the framework of the law that exists, that speaks to a declaration in the earliest possible time.
Marcel Thomas from the Starbrook News. Mr. Lowenfield, what is being done to make the statements of polls accessible to the public? Because my newspaper, for example, had a tough time last evening accessing some of those SOPs because of the security systems. Sometimes not GECOM, but for the schools with their security guards, you're hearing that GECOM say nobody's supposed to come in, then their security people say nobody's supposed to come in, and the public can't get to access those. So in the interest of that public trust and transparency, how can GECOM assist in getting those accessible to members of the public?
Thanks for the question. As you would have heard your colleague ask earlier, the issue of what she refers to in the first instance as the unauthorized removal. I take the point. We may need to remove those barriers that speaks to whatever security arrangements are at the locations where polling took place after a particular time, to allow the public access into these locations, to allow media and members of the communities to gain easy access, to facilitate their own information arrangement through your media house or through your television station or whatever. So I think it's an area, the point is noted, and it's something we'll strive to ensure is minimized or eradicated for the future. But for now, as far as the schools we utilize, at the close of poll, we hand over back that school. And as you rightly said, with those statements within the school compounds that are guarded by the own school security arrangement that prevents you, and I take that point wholeheartedly.
Gordon Mosley, News Source. Mr. CEO, with just 139
of 233.
139 of 2,339. What really is the purpose of this? Should we wait until we have a larger number before we come sit in front of the national media and the country to tell them 139 out of 2,399? You know, are you creating more anxiety than there needs to be right now? Do you think you might want to reconsider waiting on a more significant collection of results, declarations, and so before you release those? And sir, there was an issue during the discipline services ballot at Ettering Bang where some of those members were unable to vote because the plane could not land. And I think GECOM had said they would have made arrangements on E-Day to get those service members to polling stations so they can cast their ballot. Could you give us an update on that?
Thank you. I did provide to the media the fact that GECOM provided transport to the police to ensure that the 15 ranks at the Ettering Bang who were unable to exercise their franchise on D-Day, that was concluded. And the GDF did provide on Friday, utilizing their own transport, to get the 26 ranks from the GDF who were in Ettering Bang for a changeover to be done to allow them to get to their ordinary residences, wherever that is, to exercise their franchise yesterday. So yes, we did, as promised, ensured that the ranks who were, could not have voted on the day specified, they were provided the opportunity to do so yesterday. I agree with your general view that I think we should wait until we have 2,339 statements before we engage the public. The reality is, and oftentimes I do get concerned, every information is of importance, I dare say. But when we deliberated yesterday, and you, as you would have appreciated, that we're trying our very best, barring, notwithstanding the conditions in which we operate, to ensure that is done. In Region 4, for example, last evening, we still, or up to today, we still have situations where we do not have all the statements. Because presiding officers assigned to polling stations, instead of preparing, as the law prescribes, a statement for the CEO and for the RO, when they dump the wrong term, when they place the statements of poll into the ballot box and have it sealed, it presents a challenge for GECOM. And we have had, while ordinarily one assumes that all the steps in place to ensure a smooth flow of activities, when it's marred by other factors, not factors probably of anxiety, but other factors, it really prevents the ability of this agency to deliver a product. When we have instances of poll closing, the count is going on, and one recognizes at the close that whether it's statements, whether it's votes not stamped, not in 1, 5, or 10 instances, but in very large instances at polling stations, one wonders when there are occasions where statements are signed off and not handed into agents. One recognizes it's not as smooth as one envisaged that the process is. So when you speak to GECOM as the body being responsible and coming with, I said a handful yesterday, with a small amount, one must appreciate the challenges that confronts the agency. As far as the receipt from POs, a statement that speaks to the outcome in those particular stations, and sometimes our inability to have statements, they're carried away by others, or transport is not provided for some statements in riverine communities. So like you, Gordon, we have our own challenges, and we're striving to ensure that in our deliverable, we assume that the entire process that we would have undergone, would have had staff members who are committed to a deliverable, one way or the other, and they act in accordance with the laws and regulations that govern that game. So we sometimes are constrained by some of these circumstances.
Do you think that you're contributing to the anxiety?
By if Region 4, for example, at this point in time, would not have received all its statements due to, or owing to, the fact that all the statements that are intended for the RO cannot be there, because this morning I have to provide a second medium for the receipt of the statement by the RO, which is to say, I go back to the box at 2:30 this morning or later than that. The same police issue, the deputy commissioner said, "CEO, my ranks at location swimming pool, they're still there." The police has informed that The PO has placed the statements in the box and has sealed it. What should we do? I said, take the box to the container, ensure it's secured, and we'll make arrangements today to ensure that it's done. So we would have loved to have 2,339 submissions to the public. But as I said, we have our own constraints to treat with. And yet we are within the prescribed law that says that. I think that the...
Well, what happens in a case, sir, like the one you're describing, where that statement of full is not in that box? And I think the parties too, they all seal off or add seals.
Yeah.
So it would have been all of them making a mistake.
Yeah, so to recover that, today, first of all, you engage the agents of the respective parties who were there and indicate to them, and in that instance, the agents left. So an agent of a party left. You indicate to them what has happened that you would have to minimize further anxiety. You secure the box and the contents therein. This morning, we arranged with those agents. Once we agreed to a time, I informed the police of our intention to go to that container, for example, in Queen's College compound and extricate that box. And I have to instruct in the presence of the parties for the opening of that box to retrieve that statement. So that is an administrative action, as I'm saying all along, that one really and truly doesn't factor in easily into the timelines that are before us. But I think your point on the anxiety is taken. I would have hoped that at some point in time in our future, we'll have the results, well, we know for as far as the post. Probably as soon as we finish entering our votes, we know what the situation is in real time.
There's a question at the back.
Thank you, Chair Taney Husti, President of the Bar Association of Guyana. I have my colleagues behind me who will pull me if I'm not brief with my question, much less the response. How much would you attribute some of the constraints to the experience and training of the officials of GECOM on the actual day? Good? E-Day.
We have persons who would have, Tini, scored 100 in the preparation for, in their training for the conduct of poll. And on the day this individual who would have done extremely well at training, suddenly because of his or her own anxiety, decides that the placement of the fictitious stamp is no longer of import, or that the issuance of an orderly ballot vis-a-vis a tendered ballot is critical to him or her, or that if this discipline services ballot that is sent to his or her polling station to facilitate intermix, he doesn't understand at the 11th hour when it's there at his location for intermix, forgets all the procedures. I dare say one wonders. So while the training of our police staff is critical to us, and in our appointment arrangement, we strive to ensure those who would have achieved the very high grade, that they're the ones who would have been appointed as POs in the first instance. And there is a place where
good afternoon, Mr. Levenfield.
those problems occur.
Good afternoon.
I'm glad you're accredited by the media now, Tini. So, yeah.
Anatoly Kurmanaev, New York Times. Mr. Levenfield, do you have any estimate of turnout in these elections? If not, can you give some anecdotal guidance how turnout compares to previous elections in the country?
Turnout is relative to the data provided in the statements of poll. each statement that is provided to me indicates, one, the amount of persons listed to vote, and B, the amount of persons who would have voted. And once that is provided to me, we have a listing of those who should have, who are listed, and those who would have, and therefore we can arithmetically determine the turnout percentages. At this point, as we've been saying, we have not yet received all the statements, but no doubt in the districts who would have completed their verification, the verification process, they would know at this point in time the turnout percentages relative to individual stations in their districts and the overall turnout for their respective districts. When I submit the declared results to me and I have all the statements, then I can easily arithmetically provide you that data, sir.
Mr. Lowenfield. CEO. My question is in relation to the recommendations made by the International Observer Mission for GECOM to have to improve its system.
More what?
To have an improved system, especially as it relates to calculating the votes. Whatever happened to those recommendations? Why were they not implemented? I think it would have eased this whole long wait.
Calculating the vote?
Tabulation. They had, the Observer Mission had recommended that GECOM implements an electronic tabulation system for calculating the votes.
I think you are fully aware that we still have a very mechanical way of doing what we do. Those of us who would have been around would have known that GECOM, under the chairmanship of Dr. Serge Bali, we would have engaged the Delian project that sought to move us from where we are to a new dimension. We tested that process at the University of Guyana student elections, both at the Tain campus and at Turkine. The matter was deliberated with political parties on the benefits that can be derived. And I dare say we're still where we are. So that was a first step that did not electronically, it was not entirely a 100% electronic arrangement. It provided results at Turkine and at Borbis in a very quick time. The matter was deliberated not only by political stakeholders, but by other stakeholders who made their recommendations. We have not yet at this point in time gone that far as moving towards electronic. So I agree that recommendations can be made for the improvement, but there are other factors that govern the implementation or how we operationalize those recommendations. And you will also know that not all recommendations made are accepted by stakeholders or by autonomous bodies like GECOM. So while I concur that recommendations are made, we have to contextualize our own environment, our general agreement to our own public, recognizing the how to and what benefits could be ascribed, and autonomous agencies, or in other instances, the government makes that determination. So it's not blindly, I agree with you, recommendations are made, but then the particular agency with responsibility will internalize, analyze, before they agree or disagree to the operationalization of those recommendations.
Mr. Lowenfield, Kimal King with Kaitor News. Over here. I don't think you answered the question. The question was, why was the recommendation not implemented? Could it have been that GECOM does not have the resources, or was the recommendation from the OAS rejected?
I didn't know who made the recommendation. Thanks for confirming that. If a recommendation is made, and I did preface by saying, not all recommendations made by bodies are accepted by agencies. That's a given. Or else we would have been doing many things here in Guyana, not only GECOM. So I don't want you to run away with the impression that all recommendations made by bodies, observer groups, or whoever must be accepted by the autonomous agency. I think we have to start on that premise. Unless you're saying whoever says what to any autonomous or other bodies in Guyana must acquiesce to the recommendations made. My humble response, sir, or that is not necessarily so.
All right, so if I may be permitted to go back to my question about Trinidad and Tobago, given what you said earlier, given what you've outlined as to where the process is with the tabulations and the declarations and so on, what is the probability that anybody would have known this morning enough about the numbers and the turnout to have been in a position to even discern who won these elections?
You know, you're in the business of the media. You know fake more than I do. You operate in that environment.
I don't fake anything, sir.
You don't think fake it is? No. Well, the person or the agency that would have arrived there, I cannot, for them, do the analytics. I cannot, for the agency who would have arrived at the results by numbers for these elections, I can't do their analytics. We have, as I said, and they would not have, as I'm saying at this point in time, received the results from Massa Canary, but they're declaring results. I have not yet received the results from all the stations in the Kanji River, but they're declaring results. That is a fact. So if they're already there, I know you can do all sort of mathematical things to arrive, but you should ascribe that this is merely mathematical in nature. Because the reality is not possible for anybody when you have not received all the statements to so do.
Mr. Lowenfield, could you say if the Guyana Elections Commission is in possession of all ballot boxes? Could you account for all the ballot boxes? And coming back to the issue with the gentlemen who were detained last night by the police, could you say if that had anything to do with any election offenses?
Well, as I said, my engagement with the police all of yesterday, last evening, today is relative to the safety of the boxes you're asking me about, that the disposition of the ranks who were involved, who would have been at polling stations for inordinately considerable time, they would have been out, for example, at 2 a.m. in some instances, and yet at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. this morning, they were still there. So our deliberations, my deliberations with the police in the main was relative to the safety of the boxes and those statements that are there to get to the places of safety and security. So if the issue relative to arrest, as I said earlier, I've not yet been apprised, and I can probably ask after I would have left here. Like you, I want to confidently say that all the 2,339 boxes are at a very safe place now, sir. If there's anything you know, you can probably share with me.
I don't know anything.
Are there other questions?
Your website can't work up to this time. I was wondering why your website is not up as yet.
All right, so Neil, as Mr. Mosley rightly pointed out, we've just entered, that's a secure platform that was developed just for the presentation of these results. And so looking at the numbers at just 139 from 2,339, of course, again, as you rightly said, the anxiety there. Now that the commission met briefly this morning and is readjust in terms of the system to move those SOPs quickly along the line, we will now proceed to having a faster process. And I can assure you that by 3 or 4 this afternoon, we will ensure that with a sizable portion of that results entered into the system, that we'll be able to push that site live.
Radha Motilal, NCN News. Mr. Lowenfield, could you say if the process involving the commissioners of GECOM, whether they have any part to play in the speeding up or delaying of the process for results, the commissioners, that is?
All GECOM secretariat staff and the commission and the commissioners, Madam Chair and commissioners, they're working their utmost to ensure that the statements of poll, all those statements of poll received, are processed and passes through the PRO for public consumption. Last evening, I recall it was at 3 a.m. this morning when the process started, when we would have received, when the commissioners, would have received their first 100 statements from Region 4. All our statements of poll and all of our ballots has built-in security features. On receipt, if you may recall, there were instances, some may say rumors of fake statements, historically. And therefore, when we started with the first 100 statements that were provided to the commissioners, in my view, rightly thought I did, because I have my feature in all the statements and all of the ballots, and the commissioners likewise, those who would have traveled to the plant for the production, they sought to ensure that the security feature inscribed in each statement was indeed and in fact on the statements that they were receiving at that hour. So we started generally both the CEO to ensure the security feature is there and the statements we're receiving, and the commissioners did likewise. And no doubt there was a slot at the outset, as Madam Chair referenced. And this morning when we deliberated on speeding up the process, we recognized whether A, we should merely bypass the inquiry using UV to ensure that those security features are there or not. And at the end of the deliberation, the commissioners decided that indeed and in fact we will speed up in the interest of the anxiety in the public, so that the the statements be there at the earliest possible time. So it's just a matter of security based on our history. We want to receive all the statements, ensuring every statement has all the security features that were piped into them at production. So we needed to see that. And the commissioners did, I did, the commissioners did, and after we recognized the slope, Madam Chair was briefed, we met, deliberated, and decided that we will fast track. I won't tell you the methodology, but we agreed that we'll fast track. Security is very important in the process.
Are there other questions? Colleagues, as indicated, we will now move as it relates to the implementation of a faster system now that the Commission has made some adjustments in terms of that move. As promised, we will have the website live by 3-4 this afternoon. And when we have at least the halfway mark as suggested by Mr. Mosley, we will invite you for another press conference. I cannot say exactly a definitive time at this point, but I'm sure that we will be working assiduously once the statement gets to us to ensure that we're able to provide that kind of information to you today. Thank you very much, and we'll be in contact as it relates to, I'll give you an alert when that website goes live, as well as the time for our next press conference.